There is a belief that sits inside most women after 40 like a slow leak. You cannot always name it, but it shapes how you relate to every cognitive challenge you face. The belief is this: my brain has already done its best work. What I have now is what I have. The changes I notice are a one-way door. That belief is wrong. Not optimistically wrong. Not motivationally wrong. Scientifically, mechanistically, evidentially wrong. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to form new connections, strengthen existing ones, and reorganize itself in response to experience, does not decline after 40. What declines are the conditions that allow it to run at full capacity, and those conditions are modifiable. The distinction sounds small. It is not. It is the difference between a story where you are a passenger watching your brain change, and a story where you understand the mechanism well enough to change the conditions it runs in. This video gives you the mechanism. Neuroplasticity is not a single event. It is a continuous biological process with a specific cellular mechanism at its core. That mechanism is called long-term potentiation, LTP for short, first described by Timothy Bliss and Terje Lomo at the University of Oslo in 1973. When neurons fire together repeatedly in response to an experience, the connection between them strengthens. The synaptic pathway becomes more efficient. That strengthening process is LTP. That is neuroplasticity happening at the cellular level. This process does not stop after your 20s or your 30s or your 40s. Eleanor Maguire at UCL showed that the hippocampi of London taxi drivers, adults who spent years demanding spatial learning from their brains, were measurably larger than those of age-matched non-drivers. The adult brain grew in response to demand. Michael Merzenich at UCSF says this directly. It is now well understood that the brain can rewire itself at any age and in almost any condition. Not that it used to be able to, that it can. Present tense, every age. So if the capacity is intact, why does your brain feel different after 40? Why does learning feel harder? Why does new information seem less sticky? Here is the answer, and it is more specific than most people have ever heard. Bruce McEwen at the Rockefeller University and Konstantin Pavlidis and colleagues published research showing that chronic stress produces a measurable suppression of LTP in the hippocampus, not a mild reduction. A significant suppression of the cellular mechanism by which your brain forms new connections. The research showed this was specific to chronic stress. A single stressful day does not suppress LTP. A chronic cortisol elevation that runs week after week, month after month, suppresses the biological machinery of neuroplasticity at the cellular level. Most women between 35 and 50 are living with exactly that level of chronic cortisol elevation. Not because of poor stress management, because of the specific biological conditions of this period of life. High cognitive demand at work, hormonal transition, disrupted sleep, caregiving load, and a nervous system that was never designed to sustain all of it simultaneously. Your brain did not stop being plastic. Cortisol switched off the mechanism that allows plasticity to run. There are 3 specific conditions that determine how efficiently your brain runs its plasticity mechanism. All 3 change after 40. All 3 are modifiable. Condition 1. Cortisol level. Chronic cortisol suppresses LTP. The mechanism involves cortisol binding to glucocorticoid receptors in the hippocampus, altering NMDA receptor function, and reducing the synaptic strengthening response that LTP requires. In plain language, when cortisol is chronically elevated, your brain's ability to form new connections is structurally suppressed. Like a dimmer switch turned most of the way down. The capacity is there. The switch position is wrong. Condition 2. Sleep quality. LTP initiated during waking hours requires consolidation during slow-wave sleep to become stable long-term memory. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has documented that slow-wave sleep is when the hippocampus replays newly encoded experiences, converting the initial LTP signal into durable structural changes. When slow-wave sleep is disrupted, the consolidation process is interrupted. The LTP signal was initiated. The learning happened. But the offline processing that makes it stick did not complete. This is why you can read something, understand it completely, and not be able to recall it 2 days later. Condition 3. Novelty and cognitive demand. Merzenich is precise about this. The brain does not respond to familiar challenge. It responds to genuinely novel demand. With age, most people's daily environments become increasingly familiar. When genuine novelty decreases, the signal that drives LTP initiation decreases with it. Not because the brain has lost the ability to respond to novelty, because it is not receiving novelty to respond to. Merzenich describes what happens without sufficient novelty input as increased chatter. The brain becomes less precise in how it resolves information. By providing appropriate stimulation, you can counteract this degeneration. His word, counteract. Think about a time in the last few years when you were completely absorbed in something, where you were learning something new and it was going in cleanly, where connections were forming in real time and you could feel them forming, where an hour passed and felt like 10 minutes. That state is the experiential signature of LTP running at high efficiency. Cortisol was low. Sleep the night before was probably good. The task was genuinely novel. All three conditions for plasticity were met. You were not in a different brain on that day. You were in the same brain with the right conditions. That state is not behind you. It is available to you whenever the three conditions are met. Quick, honest check before the fixes. Which of these three scenarios sounds most familiar? 1. I often feel like I understood something, and then it simply was not there when I needed it. This is the sleep consolidation problem. 2. I feel like I could learn and change, but I am too tired, too wired, or too stretched to actually do it. This is the cortisol suppression problem. 3. My days feel repetitive, and I cannot remember the last time I genuinely did not know what I was doing. This is the novelty deficit. Drop your number in the comments. Before the fixes, I want to address something. Everything described so far explains why the conditions for plasticity are harder to maintain after 40. None of it is an excuse. None of it is a sentence. Merzenich's research with older adults showed that targeted cognitive training produced improvements in processing speed, working memory, and learning efficiency in people in their 70s and 80s. Not stabilization. Improvement. Active, measurable improvement. The 80-year-old pianist who continues to learn new pieces does not have a young brain. They have an old brain that has been given the conditions plasticity requires, consistently, over time. And that brain performs in ways that confound every assumption about what age means for cognitive capacity. The question is not whether your brain can change after 40. The question is whether you are giving it the conditions to do so. Stop. Before the three protocols, a reframe. We are not trying to make your brain young again. That is the wrong goal. A young brain is a noisy, inefficient, easily distracted brain that has not yet figured out what matters. What you are working with after 40 is something genuinely different. A brain with crystallized intelligence, accumulated pattern recognition, and the specific cognitive advantages that come from decades of learning. What the three protocols do is create the conditions for that experienced brain to keep forming new connections and consolidating new learning. You are not chasing your younger brain. You are upgrading the one you have. 3 conditions. 3 specific protocols, one for each. Protocol 1. The cortisol window. Chronic cortisol suppresses LTP. The protocol is to create a daily period where cortisol is reliably low and to use that period for learning. Cortisol is naturally lower in the mid to late afternoon for most adults, approximately 2 to 4 hours after the midday peak. This is your highest plasticity window. Whatever you want to learn, practice, or encode, do it in this window. The autonomy discharge and completion signal protocols from the Revenge Bedtime video in this series directly lower evening cortisol. If your cortisol is elevated at night, your slow-wave sleep is also disrupted. Protocol 2. The consolidation window. LTP consolidates during slow-wave sleep. The protocol is to protect the first 2 sleep cycles, which are front-loaded with slow-wave sleep, from anything that disrupts them. The 3 most common disruptors in the 35-50 age group are alcohol in the evening, elevated cortisol at sleep onset, and inconsistent sleep timing. The deep sleep protocol in this series covers each one in full. One specific finding worth highlighting. Slow-wave sleep not only consolidates LTP but also triggers BDNF release, which primes the hippocampus for new plasticity the following day. Each good night of sleep makes the next day's learning more efficient. Protocol 3. The Novelty Schedule. The brain requires genuine novelty to initiate LTP, not a slightly harder version of a familiar task. Genuine novelty, something with no familiar framework available. Merzenich is specific. Once the brain has the pattern, the demand drops, and so does the neural growth signal. The protocol is to introduce one genuinely novel activity per week at minimum. A new language, instrument, craft, or field of knowledge that puts you at genuine beginner status. That beginner discomfort is the LTP signal firing. Here is what 80-year-old pianists, late-life language learners, and older adults in Merzenich's trials share. None of them were trying to reverse their age. They were consistently placing themselves in the three conditions plasticity requires: low enough cortisol to let LTP run, sufficient slow-wave sleep for consolidation to complete, genuine novelty to trigger the signal in the first place. And the result was not just maintenance. It was measurable improvement in processing speed, working memory, and learning efficiency in people in their 70s and 80s. Your brain did not forget how to change after 40. It is waiting for the conditions that allow it to. Low cortisol, consolidated sleep, genuine novelty. Those are not lifestyle habits. Those are the biological prerequisites for neuroplasticity. Create the conditions. The brain does what it has always done. Merzenich's research showed it. McEwen's research showed the suppressor. McGuire's taxi drivers showed the capacity. The conditions that used to exist automatically in your 20s and 30s no longer exist automatically after 40. They need to be created deliberately. That is the difference between your brain at 28 and your brain at 48. Not the capacity, the conditions. Save this video. The next time someone tells you that learning gets harder after 40, come back to this. Learning gets harder when the conditions for LTP are wrong. Those conditions are yours to manage. The next video in this series covers the one specific protein that physically triggers the growth of new brain connections, what produces it after 40, and the protocol shown in clinical research to increase hippocampal volume in aging adults. That video is next. If you are not here to stay average, subscribe.